With President Trump's return to the White House, the role and rights of federal workers is under scrutiny, perhaps like never before. But you may be surprised to learn the debate over who should get government jobs is an old one. Our history lesson is from Mo Rocca.
To the victor belong the spoils. For decades in the 1800s, that phrase was more than a slogan. It was the official hiring policy of the U.S. government.
You win the election, you're entitled to put all your own people in there.
So as the White House changed parties, everyone cleared out, basically.
That's right.
Journalist and historian Scott Greenberger says that under that spoils system, the main job requirement for most federal employees was loyalty. It was a system inaugurated by Democratic President Andrew Jackson.
When he came in, he was, and this will sound familiar, he was afraid that sort of entrenched bureaucrats would resist his policies, and so he cleaned everybody out.
Were people aghast at this?
I don't think they were aghast when it began, but by the time we get to the 1870s and the 1880s, it was one of the top issues on the national agenda.
This was a period of abundant facial hair and abundant wealth and corruption in American politics.
It's a fascinating period with so many parallels to our own time.
But, says Greenberger, a fight was underway to replace the spoils system with the hiring of qualified government workers, regardless of their political views, whose job security didn't depend on whoever was president. Civil service reform, as it was known, may not sound sexy, but it was one of the hottest political issues of the Gilded Age, even attracting the attention of America's foremost author.
They started just down there.
In 1876, the same year he published Tom Sawyer, Mark Twain participated in his first political rally right here in Hartford, Connecticut, says a local historian, Jason Scappaticci.
And this was a very big deal for Twain to be here, yes?
Yeah, he had voted, but he had never campaigned for anybody.
After marching through downtown in support of Republican presidential nominee Rutherford B. Hayes, the legendary humorist called for an end to the spoils system. "We will not hire a blacksmith who never lifted a sledge," he said. "We will not hire a schoolteacher who does not know the alphabet. But when you come to our civil service, we serenely fill great numbers of our minor public offices with ignoramuses."
During this period, Twain's fame is really starting to take off.
And this speech he delivers in Hartford is on the front page of the New York Times.
That just goes to show how vital he is, how big his name is. As you can see, it's beautiful.
Mallory Howard is the assistant curator at the Mark Twain House and Museum in Hartford.
What a stash.
He was a handsome younger man.
She's not surprised that Twain would have been mortified by the spoils system.
I think he felt it was embarrassing putting people in office who are not prepared. I think it doesn't make sense to him.
It's anti-meritocratic.
Exactly.
Hayes made it to the White House, but little progress was made on civil service reform during his single term. Hayes was succeeded by President James Garfield, who ran on reform. But only months after being sworn in, the spoils system exacted its most horrifying toll. Garfield was assassinated by a disgruntled and delusional office seeker named Charles Guiteau. Guiteau had campaigned for Garfield and believed the president owed him. Worse still for reformers, Garfield's vice president, Chester Alan Arthur, suddenly elevated to the top job, had climbed the ranks of dirty machine politics, enjoying the fruits of the spoils system along the way.
I mean, this was a nightmare scenario for the reformers. And then all of a sudden, here he is, he's president of the United States, and he expresses support for civil service reform, which shocked everybody.
Yes, in a surprising about-face, in 1883, President Chester A. Arthur, contrite by some accounts over the murder of Garfield, signed the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act, the first of its kind in U.S. history. The law was strengthened over time.
Civil service reform will help taxpayers get what they have been paying for.
But it laid the groundwork for a professional bureaucracy, responsible for everything from food safety to financial regulation.
It really paved the way for a more active federal government.
Of course, the federal government of the late 1800s, with about 50,000 employees, looked a lot different than today's workforce of more than 2 million.
With you at my side, we will demolish the deep state.
And critics, including President Donald Trump, believe the numbers and the protections afforded those civil service workers have gone too far. Hence, President Trump's executive order this past week aiming to make it easier to fire some federal workers.
We're getting rid of all of the cancer.
Scott Greenberger says maybe the time has come for another debate about the role of the civil service.
Yes, you should be able to fire people who aren't doing their jobs, and the protections shouldn't be such that someone who's incompetent is allowed to stay in a job. At the same time, if you eliminate those protections entirely, then you go back to the sort of system that we had in the 19th century where only political loyalists are serving these positions.
A system undone by an unlikely hero who most people don't even remember was president.
And Chester Arthur regularly wins the most obscure president.
Wow. One that Mark Twain himself put on a pedestal.
It's funny that we hardly remember the guy today, but when he died, people, including Mark Twain, said, wow, that guy was the greatest president we'd ever had.